We do have a brand new business correspondent here with us on the morning show, bringing us the latest updates that we need for a couple minutes. Femi, it's amazing to have you.
Well, Adefemi Akinsanya, good to have you.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yes, you're welcome to the morning show and to Arise News.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Well, let's start here in Nigeria. Crude oil exports have risen to 2.2 million barrels per day. Now, that was in August, and that's according to Bloomberg. And if that is confirmed, that would be the highest level this year. Now, Bloomberg's data shows that the 77% spike in cases of sabotage of oil infrastructure has not significantly affected production. Oil pipeline vandalism was not enough, they say, to dampen the significantly higher crude production in the past 6 months. Now, relations with other oil majors has also improved over this period, with a renewed commitment to pay its arrears of joint crude oil production with the international oil companies.
It's very interesting, to be honest with you.
It's very interesting and also a little worrying, because if we do confirm these numbers of 2.2 million barrels per day, that would show that Nigeria has again flouted its OPEC cap. We know that in January, they were supposed to OPEC and non-OPEC countries were supposed to limit output to around 1.2 barrels per day.
That's what the new Saudi minister was talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, 1.685 million barrels per day was approved for Nigeria, and at least about twice this year we have flouted that.
Exactly.
Even despite the fact that when we asked for, an extension of that, a review of that cap for Nigeria, it was not granted. So that is one part of it. The second part of it is that we need to double-check that Bloomberg story.
We do.
Whether it is true and where the figures are coming from. Because you recall that in the NNPC report for June, there were a number of issues that were raised by NNPC itself. One, about pipeline vandalism, which has been affecting production.
Yeah, so it is interesting that Bloomberg say, despite the vandalism, oil production has still crept up, and it's something that does need to be confirmed because
NNPC also complained about oil theft.
Yes, indeed.
And the effect of oil theft on productivity. So I think the numbers would need to be checked. But of course, if we're part of an international body, about the 14 OPEC plus countries, and we commit, as we did in December, to the cap that was prescribed to prevent oil glut, then of course we have a responsibility to stand by it and not to continue to flout.
Do we forecast any punishments from OPEC? Because of course, even if we do or do not confirm these figures, Nigeria isn't the only OPEC country accused of breaking its cap. Do we see any repercussions?
Yes, but what's also interesting, have you noticed that for the first time in a long time, most of our crude oil exports are now going back to the United States? That's something that hasn't happened in a very, very long time. So it's also interesting to see how that partnership of trade may also be giving us a certain leeway with OPEC that we didn't expect. Or do you think that's a far stretch?
Well, I mean, you raised the question about sanctions. Well, that remains to be seen. But the first thing, of course, is would the NNPC, accept that these figures quoted by Bloomberg are correct? Because, NNPC seems to be saying one thing, and Bloomberg seems to be saying
and also quick to debunk.
And I think that the official figures from NNPC will seem to be more reliable.
Absolutely. On to our next story.
On to our next story now. The World Bank says Somalia's economy is expected to grow by 2.9% this year, and that's up from its previous forecast of 2.8%. The Horn of Africa country has been battling conflicts, as we know, since 1991, when clan warlords overthrew President Siad Barre, and then they turned on each other. Over the past decade, it's been hit by famine and sporadic terror attacks by the Al-Qaeda-linked militant group Al-Shabaab.
Well, any positive news is welcome, particularly from Somalia, which, as you pointed out, is a country that has been in turmoil, has been war-torn, has been, facing strife since Siad Barre, left government in 1991, and then also leading to issues in the northern part of Somalia with the declaration of independence, more or less, by Somaliland. Yeah. Now, the indication here is that this 2.9% growth is as a result of a review of tax collection from the government, by the government, and that has generated, some activity. But in spite of all of this, Somalia still faces the issues of poverty, of climate change, of insecurity, of terrorism, of piracy, and all this, of course, have affected, this economic prospect that we have seen, this growth. It has not necessarily translated into very concrete development, post-war, either in terms of infrastructure or the state of the health sector or the state of the education sector. So let's see whether this is sustainable, and whether the authorities in Somalia will be able to go beyond tax collection, to re-engineer the economy.
I think it's so welcoming, though, because every time an African country that is that war-torn as Somalia is can prove themselves to Africa and to the rest of the world, their hope should lie in the fact that, to be honest, if Rwanda could do it, I doubt that there's any other African country that can't, to be honest.
Absolutely, I do agree. I do think that the state of security has been such a barrier to Somalia's growth, and that is an ongoing problem. But as you've said, Somalia, I'm sure the rest of Africa welcomes good news and hopes that this will put the country on a track for continuing to develop. It's in good company, very close to Ethiopia, which has been doing very well under its new leadership.
There's some recovery after a 17-year war. And
so they're in good company.
Brilliant.
Well, you have any other story?
Well, just one more, sadly.
Okay. Don't leave us.
Moving on to China. China's Huawei has dropped a lawsuit against the US government after Washington released telecommunications equipment that it had seized on suspicion of violations of export controls, according to a court filing on Monday. Now, Huawei, which has been placed on a US trade blacklist since May, had sued the Commerce Department and other US government agencies for seizing its equipment in Alaska back in 2017, which was on its way back to China after a lab test in California. Huawei said the US government returned the equipment in August after confirming no export license was required, and it decided to drop the suit.
Finally.
Okay, that's fine. But, all of this must be seen in the context of the war between China and the United States, a trade war that has affected not just major Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE, leading technology companies, particularly with regard to 5G technology. When this broke out, even companies in the United States were affected. About 30 companies doing business with some of these Chinese companies were then required, to go through the Commerce Department to get special permission for them to be able to continue to do business. And Huawei in particular has been targeted, although Huawei says it has a store of microprocessors it can use for its 5G technology, and that it will do its own production. I
think it is scaring a lot of international countries.
Yes,
their potential.
Yes. Well, they also had issues in England.
Well, Donald Trump took the problem over. He literally told Theresa May, back off, when he went to the UK.
But I think the long term of it, whether it's Huawei that is involved or affected or any other company, the China-US trade war is affecting the whole of the world, because it's a case of when two elephants fight.
It's the grass that suffers.
It goes beyond the two elephants themselves. The grass suffers.
Femi, thank you so much for these headlines.
Thank you very much, and welcome once again.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes. That is all that we have on the news headlines.